I was just having a conversation with my DM about Ranger spell options. He was making the argument that Hunter's Mark is a good spell. I tend to disagree. I think it's a situationally middling spell, but that's not what this video is about. The conversation went on to talk about concentration as a mechanic, because the reason why our ranger in our campaign is not casting Hunter's Mark, aside from her personal dislike, okay, so it's not the reason she's not casting it. She hates Hunter's Mark as a spell because it went bad one time, which is a little bit silly. But the reason why I would argue that she shouldn't be casting Hunter's Mark most of the time is because she is instead concentrating on Pass Without Trace. Pass Without Trace being an incredibly useful spell, one of the best ranger spells that they have on their entire list. And it's a long duration concentration spell. And I made the observation that I probably have talked about this in the past online. I'm not sure if I've necessarily articulated it in exactly this way, but the mechanic of concentration, interestingly, incentivizes a player to pick a single spell that is concentration and focus entirely on that until they are no longer able to cast that spell. So Pass Without Trace lasts, I believe it's 1 hour, which is long enough time you can have 3 or 4 fights very reasonably within that time. If you don't lose concentration, you have the effect of Pass Without Trace for 3 or 4 encounters up to. And Pass Without Trace is an incredibly powerful spell. Like, the plus 10 bonus to stealth is huge when you consider the rules for getting surprise rounds. A lot of the time, that is a free full round of actions that your party gets where the opponents do not get to act. That's very powerful. It's incredibly powerful when it works. It doesn't work all the time. Like, a lot of situations prevent you from getting surprise rounds. That happens, whatever. But the chance of getting it is very good. In your standard average scenarios, Pass Without Trace usually equates to a surprise round every fight. And surprise rounds are incredibly strong. So because you have a strong, long-duration concentration effect, the incentive, the way that the game is encouraging you to play by virtue of the way the mechanics work, is to not cast Hunter's Mark. Because Hunter's Mark is a relatively low-impact, short-duration spell. And yeah, it's a lower spell level, so of course it's not as good, but one necessitates not using the other. And it's an interesting effect that is, I think, maybe not immediately intuitive, and I don't think it's intended. I think the idea is that I feel like, and this is pure intuition here, I feel like Wizards of the Coast expects the Ranger to be casting Hunter's Mark in every fight. It's like a signature spell to them. It is the 5e incarnation of 4th edition's Hunter's Quarry, which worked very similarly. Except Hunter's Quarry is at will and can be reused each turn if you decide to change targets. Hunter's Mark has a lot of disadvantages in that it is a daily resource. It takes concentration. If the enemy runs away or hides, you can't cast, you can't just switch it. You have to recast it. So it costs more resources. In general, and it doesn't scale automatically with level. So it is a significantly reduced version of Hunter's Quarry. But I think that they still expect it to be this sort of like iconic central feature of the class. And that's why they in the 1D&D playtest, they're really emphasizing it. I think they made it concentrationless, and you get like so many casts for free. I forget what all the things that they do. But like Wizards of the Coast wants you to cast Hunter's Mark. They expect you to cast Hunter's Mark. They think that this is a core central part of the Ranger's kit. And it's really not. It's a situational spell. Situationally middling, in fact. Your standard ranger who's like trying to do a lot of damage, which is when you would cast Hunter's Mark, you want to maximize your damage, should probably be using 2-hand crossbows with crossbow expert and sharpshooter in the archery fighting style. So you're shooting 2 times in tier 1, 3 times in tier 2, etc. Using the sharpshooter power attack feature whenever you have a relatively low AC target because your bonus to hit is so high. And in that context, Hunter's Mark is actually a DPR loss if you aren't getting multiple turns targeting a single enemy. So if you lose concentration, if your enemy dies and you have to use another bonus action to switch targets, if your enemy runs away and you can't attack it again, like if any of those things happen, you lose DPR. You have reduced your damage by spending this resource and trying to do this thing. So it's a risk, and it's situational. Like the DPR boost is passable. Like it's not outstanding. It's not necessarily even your best option for a DPR boost, but it's easy to use and it's pretty reliable in certain circumstances. But even besides all that, you don't want to cast it because that means you're not concentrating on Pass Without Trace. And that's an interesting incentive that has been created, and I think it's quite unintentional. Because concentration is supposed to be, you can only have one powerful ongoing spell effect at a time. And it's not supposed to be like you can't use your core features while you're concentrating, because the core features probably shouldn't be concentration. They should be like these, bombastic, big, powerful effects, like a wizard throwing down a sleet storm. That's concentration. Or, maintaining control of a spell that, like a hold person spell that completely locks down a target for an extended period of time. Or can. Please don't use that example. That's actually a really bad example because charm person doesn't last that long. Or hold person doesn't last that long. I don't remember which one I said. Anyways, what the point that I'm getting at is that this is a thing that does happen in 5th edition where the mechanical incentives kind of make you do the opposite of what's in the character fantasy. And the reason why I'm speaking with this like intrigued tone is because I'm thinking through it as I'm talking here. And I think it's most egregious with the Ranger. Your first level spell slots are probably best spent on things like Goodberry, which is an extremely efficient healing spell. I wouldn't say extremely efficient. For 5th edition, it's pretty efficient. 10 hit points back for a single cast is pretty good out of combat healing. If you don't have money to spend on a lot of potions. Hunter's Mark occasionally. And you could make the argument that this just comes down to Hunter's Mark is just not designed well, and you are not encouraged to use it because it's not a good spell. I don't know that I can necessarily agree with that, but yeah, kinda. Because Hunter's Mark is not a bad spell. It's just not good enough to be a staple, like a core feature of the class, like it seems like they want it to be. And I think a big part of that is the fact that it is concentration and it takes a daily resource in a class that has very few of these resources. The Ranger is a half caster. They get half as many spell slots as a full caster. They don't really have slots to spend on luxury spells. I walk around as a wizard and I see a locked door and I'm like, we don't got time to pick this lock. Knock spell. Because I've got enough slots. I've got tons of slots. Rangers don't have tons of slots. They have to be very picky and choosy about what they spend those slots on. They don't get to prepare a lot of spells. They have to be very picky about what spells they prepare. You squeeze the class tightly and say, hey, your resources are restricted. Hey, why aren't you using these other resources that aren't the best ones? Well, that's the natural conclusion. So what I'm saying is, I'm not coming to any it should be this way point, but what I am saying is that there's an interesting dynamic that is created by the rules and the abilities and the mechanics, particularly concentration when paired with long duration spells, encourages you not to use other features. And I think that's weird. That's odd game design, isn't it? Most games, in my experience, want you to use features. They want you to use lots of features. If you have abilities that your class grants you, it's like, hey, here's a toy. Play with the toy. hey, here's more toys. Play with all these toys. And then in 5th edition, you've got, hey, here's a toy. You can't play with any other toys if you want to play with this toy. That's weird design. And it's unusual. And I think that's for a very good reason. Most people design in a very different direction than that. And so that, I think, is part of the problem with 5th edition's spell design. Concentration is a mechanic that, while well-intentioned, and I understand what they're going for, and I don't necessarily disagree with the goal, but I think it creates incentives that shouldn't be there.